And Kenyan farmers suffer huge losses as desert locusts destroy crops. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. Sealing the revenue gap, IMF wants Uganda to bring more people into the tax bracket. And in sports, counting down to the 2020 WRC Safari Rally, Kenya Rally Championship kicks off today. We begin with the coronavirus outbreak in China. The total number of confirmed cases here has surpassed 37,000. The death toll stands at 813 and over 2,700 people have recovered. More than half of the confirmed cases and most of the deaths are in Hubei province, where the epidemic started. The good news is that the rate of new suspected cases in Hubei appears to be declining. Guangdong and Zhejiang provinces are the areas with most cases outside Hubei. Each has reported more than 1,000 cases. Beijing has reported more than 300 and Shanghai over 290. The virus has spread to 24 other countries with a total of 302 confirmed cases. Well, an international team led by the World Health Organization will leave for China early next week. They will be monitoring every single Chinese province on a daily basis. Officials also say that the WHO is taking action against the spread of false information.
While the virus spreads, misinformation makes the job of our heroic health workers even harder. It's diverting the attention of decision makers, and it causes confusion and spreads fear to the general public. At WHO, we're not just battling the virus, we're also battling the trolls and conspiracy theorists that push misinformation and undermine the outbreak response.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has commended China's efforts in fighting the coronavirus. From the sidelines of the annual African Union summit, Guterres said stigma against China due to the spread of the virus is inappropriate. CGTN's Giram Chala has more now from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia.
Secretary-General Antonio Guterres came to Addis to take part in the ongoing African Union Heads of State Summit. But his press conference was dominated by questions about the coronavirus. Mr. Guterres said what China is doing in its fight against the spread of the virus is remarkable.
It is clear that there is a massive effort that is making by China in order to contain the disease and to avoid its propagation. And I think that that effort is remarkable. The Chinese themselves recognize that the dimension is such that there are some handicaps and some problems that have to be addressed, but we are also at the same time committed through the World Health Organization to support all countries, namely African countries, in order to develop the capacities necessary to contain the disease when it propagates to other countries in the world.
When asked how the spread of the virus should be fought, Secretary-General Guterres said precautionary measures are mandatory at all times. But when asked,
do you think stopping flights to China is a solution for mitigating the problem of the virus?
It has not been recommended by the World Health Organization to forbid all flights or to do more radical measures of this nature. I think it's important, as I said, a very strong international cooperation based on solidarity, and it's also important to avoid any form of stigmatization.
A very strong international cooperation and solidarity was a key takeaway from the Secretary General's speech on the virus. The recommendations by the World Health Organization must govern how countries respond to the spread of the coronavirus. Giram Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Efforts are in full swing in Wuhan to ensure every confirmed and suspected patient is attended to. Authorities are working to identify 4 categories of people: confirmed patients, suspected patients, their close contacts, and those with fever. Hospitals are taking in confirmed patients while the others are quarantined. Authorities are promising no family or individual will be neglected. CGTN's Victor Ning has the details.
Various prevention and control measures are being implemented in Wuhan. For local authorities, one of the most pressing tasks is to provide enough beds for the coronavirus patients. More than 20 designated hospitals are handling the brunt of the epidemic. Around 9,000 beds in these facilities have been set aside for patients in critical condition. The local government has also constructed 2 brand new purpose-built hospitals called Huashen and Leishen, and these add a further 2,500 beds. Meanwhile, Wuhan is also rolling out more temporary hospitals for patients with mild symptoms of the disease by converting sports stadiums and exhibition centers into treatment centers. 3 of these, with a total of 4,000 beds, are already taking patients. The remaining makeshift facilities could provide as many as 8,000 beds. The campuses of Hubei Provincial Party School and several local colleges are also becoming new medical centers. On top of that, new quarantine centers are housing suspected cases as well as patients with fever. Converted from medical institutions and hotels, they are offering over 10,000 beds. They help screen potential cases and cut off further virus transmission among communities. Still, there's a gap between what's provided and what's actually needed. Authorities in Wuhan say more than 20,000 people are staying at home in self-quarantine. Victor Ning, CGTN.
Well, Wuhan has launched a large-scale check. Community workers are going door to door to check on the health condition of all residents. CGTN's reporter Zhou Jiexian has the details.
The city is preparing itself for what the vice premier called on local authorities a wartime battle with coronavirus. The Hubei province now runs the 24-hour duty system, beefing up prevention efforts in terms of medical treatment, traffic supplies, and market regulation. Particularly, personnel are dispatched to track patients and potentials who are believed inadequately self-isolated. To prevent those dispersed among the public, extensive screening from house to house are underway. And meanwhile, testing for those suspected of infection will be conducted and finish its final touch within 2 days. And medical facilities are being scaled up as some exhibition centers, gymnasiums, schools, and hotels are being reused as the isolation communities in the city. And the provincial government says all relevant departments are also ramping up efforts to ensure a more efficient allocation of resources, which are now facing shortage of medical supplies in hospitals. When dealing with admittance to these hospitals, patients' recovery and lower rate of infection and death, doctors I spoke with from Zhongnanshan Hospital warned, given the inconsistent information about incidents and various symptoms over clinic diagnosis, people moving in pharmacies and supermarkets available now have to cope with possible contagion, while Wuhan's community service needs stepping up more prevention efforts.
Well, for more on the coronavirus outbreak, we are now joined by our reporter, Ge Yunfei, who is in Wuhan for us. Thank you very much for joining us. What is the latest situation in Wuhan, and what is the most pressing issue in the city right now?
Hi, Karen. The most pressing issue in the city right now is to identify, as you mentioned, the 4 categories of the people who might be infected with the virus. And in a previous meeting held this morning, the municipal government of Wuhan vowed to hospitalize all the confirmed infected patients who stay at home for isolation by Sunday midnight, which is within 6 hours from now on. And those who are severely ill will be sent to the major designated hospitals. and those who are mildly ill will be sent to the makeshift hospitals. And the government has dispatched nearly 17,000 government employees and community members, workers, and other people to those resident communities which has seriously infected. And all the 34,000 government employees and workers are sent to ensure every confirmed and suspected patient is attended to. And the authorities are converting universities, colleges, and hotels to inpatient wards to accommodate those who are going to be quarantined. And yesterday, the central government's guiding team in Hubei province has ordered authorities of the Hubei province, including its capital Wuhan, must take resolute measures to make sure all people needing medical assistance are admitted to medical facilities for the novel coronavirus pneumonia. Back to you.
And tell us more about the importance of quarantine for the city and its impact on the rest of China. How are families coping with it?
Yeah, the main reason behind Wuhan is vowed to leave no patient attended to is to completely cut off the further virus transmission among communities. The novel coronavirus has two major characteristics. It's highly contagious and has a long incubation period, as long as 2 weeks. And what makes it most dangerous is that it's highly contagious in this long incubation period. So the best way to contain the virus transmission is to completely separate those infected from the healthy people. And the first essential step is to achieve that goal is to find out exactly how many people in Wuhan are infected. And the second is to admit those who are infected and send them to different levels of quarantine places according to their ill conditions, and to ease the dire demand for doctors and nurses, as many infected patients have complained that they have not received proper medical care. Chinese government has sent more than 11,000 medical staff members from across China to send them to Wuhan to help combat the outbreak. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was Gu Yunfei there in Wuhan with the latest on the novel coronavirus pneumonia. Well, as China combats the coronavirus outbreak, many countries around the world have shown solidarity with China's efforts. In Egypt, the business community is lending a hand, as Yasser Hakim reports.
Nadia Helmi is a university professor and author who is specialized in Chinese affairs. This week, she has donated the proceeds of her latest book to China. Helmi is also leading efforts in Egypt to gather donations to China after the outbreak of the coronavirus.
I found that 90% of our businessmen work with China or import Chinese products. I asked Chinese officials how we can donate to China. They sent me account numbers in China that accept donations, and I sent these account numbers to many businessmen.
A bank account has been opened in China to receive the donations. Helmi is creating awareness about this account.
Many have been enthusiastic to the idea and saw that it's in our ethics and Islamic traditions to support others and show solidarity with our friends. China has always provided a lot of services to Egypt, and there are huge Chinese investments in Cairo, the Suez Canal, and the Chinese industrial city of Tida, which houses more than 1,500 Chinese factories.
The business community, with its financial means, have taken to the idea.
It makes sense. I believe we're all supporting, and we hope that they will overcome it. Especially, China is very well connected with all other countries. Whatever is happening there, the world is becoming small. It will spread all over. So if this is supported over there, it might contain this virus, and it will help China to overcome it. And I have full confidence that China will overcome this very soon.
It's a very good initiative. Besides the money being collected, just the fact that personnel are behind the case or the cause, this on its own gives credibility.
The donations for China are slowly picking up pace in the North African country. China has been one of the main supporters of Egypt in its attempts to rebuild its shattered economy for the last few years. And for Egyptians, this is the time for payback for the Chinese. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Several African countries are working to ensure that they have the capacity to deal with the virus, as well as testing samples. Guinea is one of them.
We have received reagents that identify the new coronavirus. We have 2 laboratories, in particular that of the National Institute of Public Health and the Pasteur Institute of Guinea, which will receive in a few days reagents necessary to make tests. We have only reactivated the devices we had used to fight Ebola. Indeed, we did not do it at a national level, but according to the risk importation of the disease through the various entry points of the country. We have strengthened health security by introducing temperature measurement systems to monitor travelers returning to the country, to deepen investigations to see if they meet the case definitions established by the WHO.
Meanwhile, school children in Kenya have been sending messages of support to China. Hundreds of children held up posters praying for China and Wuhan, the city at the epicenter of the novel coronavirus outbreak. The signs were drawn by the children themselves, who stood in a heart-shaped pattern.
We love China! And we are with you! And we are with you! At this difficult time! At this difficult time! On the outbreak! On the outbreak! Of the deadly coronavirus.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including 26 people killed after a soldier opened fire at a shopping complex in Thailand. And Kenyan farmers suffer huge losses as desert locusts destroy crops.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
A soldier has been shot dead after going on a shooting rampage that left at least 26 people dead and more than 52 injured in the northeastern city of Nakhon Ratchasima. The soldier was allegedly angry about a land deal in which he felt he had been cheated. The killings began when the soldier opened fire in a house before moving to an army camp and then to the mall while posting on Facebook.
I was worried about the use of force. It has to go gradually from light to heavy use of force. Measures taken have to be appropriate. That is the most important because there were a lot of people present, including the shooter, officials, bystanders. The death toll is at 27. 57 were injured. 25 have gone home, while 32 people were admitted to the hospital. It was a personal conflict over a house deal. The shooter had an issue with money, fought for 3 days. Nobody expected it would turn violent.
To Tunisia now, and the North African country has tightened security to prevent any spillover of violence near to the Libyan border. The Tunisian Security and Defence Committee is set to discuss national security this week, as CGTN's Adnan Chouachi now reports.
National Defense Minister Mohammed Karim Jamousi stressed that the situation is reassuring in the southeast of the country, saying that army units are fully ready to deal with any contingency.
We have reinforced the army presence on the border with Libya. Land, sea, air capabilities can adapt to any situation. The army is confident. The public should not worry.
Interior Minister Hisham Fourati said that all measures have been taken to prepare for any scenario on the Tunisian-Libyan border.
The security units installed throughout the year on the land and sea borders are now working to deal with the possible repercussions of the Libya crisis following the rise in tension in this neighboring country.
Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs noted that the Tunisian General Consulate in Tripoli has remained open since 2018, adding that the Tunisian mission is the only diplomatic representation established today in the Libyan capital, despite the complexity of the situation in this country.
The situation in Tripoli is abnormal. It's very complex, and the security situation is set to escalate. Tunisian diplomats are working in very dangerous conditions, but Tunisia is determined to keep the general consulate open.
Authorities downplayed fears related to the influx of tens of thousands of displaced persons to Tunisia in the event of war outbreak in Libya.
The National Security Council announced that measures have been taken to prepare for any possible infiltration of terrorists on Tunisian soil. Authorities said the situation in Libya should not distract security and army units from the challenges on the Tunisian-Algerian border. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The security situation in the Sahel region has been deteriorating rapidly, and as the African Union looks for solutions, violent attacks and displacements of people in Burkina Faso continue. CGTN's Penina Karibe brings us an update on this humanitarian crisis.
We're in Barasalogo town, right in the heart of one of the many mushrooming displacement camps in the northern region of Burkina Faso. Since the establishment of this camp in October last year, the numbers of the displaced has steadily risen and presently has 78,000 people. They literally depend on humanitarian agencies for their survival. Now, the economy of this place has collapsed. Teachers, doctors, businessmen, they have all run away from the insecurity. There is no money in circulation, and that has compounded the situation for a people already on the lowest levels of poverty. But these people right here, these are the lucky ones. The mayor of this area tells us there's some 35,000 people that have been blocked, some 65 kilometers from this place. For 2 months, they've been living with no food and medical supplies. Now, the mayor says that the road has completely been cut off by militants who have reportedly planted landmines on the road. And he tells us that just last week, a truck supplying aid to these people was blown off. One person died. In total, the number of military personnel who've been killed along this route going to try and access those people since last September are 10. The mayor is now in talks with the military for them to provide security for aid agencies to provide aid to those people and eventually bring them out to safer areas. Penina Karibe, CGTN in Barasalogo, Burkina Faso.
China's engagement under the African Union has increased over the decades. CGTN's Daniel Artmoy takes a look at some of the key achievements between China and the African Union.
Over the past decade, the partnership between Africa and China to promote peace and security across the continent has grown rapidly. Beijing, through the African Union Security Council, has bolstered its involvement in peacekeeping missions to Africa's war-torn countries of DR Congo, South Sudan, Mali, Liberia, and Sudan's western region of Darfur.
China has grown into a very major economic superpower and wants to have a presence in Africa in different ways as well. The important thing is that China is a good partner for Africa as long as we have proper strategies through which we can benefit from that cooperation.
The Belt and Road Initiative, one of China's signature programs, is helping to transform Africa's infrastructure networks through the construction of roads, ports and bridges across Africa.
China continues to actively carry out its cooperation with the African Union and other regional organizations in Africa and supporting their efforts in seeking stability and development.
China has also emerged as one of the largest aid donors to Africa in recent years, helping to build public facilities, train engineers and technicians, deploy medical staff and ease the burden of debt on the continent.
China and Africa have always really read from the same script when it comes to issues at the UN Security Council. On economic relations, China has come in a strong way in support of Africa, particularly in the transformation of the economies in the area of infrastructure development.
The cooperation between China and Africa in the fields of culture, education and health has also achieved satisfactory results. The AU headquarters in Addis Ababa is one among many Chinese signature projects in Africa, signifying friendship and partnership towards the walk to economic emancipation. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has recorded a decline in the number of measles cases since December last year. The World Health Organization says the cases reported every week have dropped from 9,000 to 3,000. But the highly infectious disease continues to claim lives. More than 6,000 people have died since last year. CGTN's Chris Optimringa has that report from Kinshasa.
The DRC is facing the world's worst measles outbreak. More than 6,000 people have died of the disease since last year. Many of them were children under 5 years. But there's been a dramatic drop in the number of measles cases over the last few months.
From mid-December to now, we see a remarkable drop in the weekly number of cases of measles that are reported, from 9,000 cases a week to 3,000 cases a week. Since January this year, we have had a total of 14,000 cases suspected of measles that have been reported, with 197 deaths.
Last year, the government and international health organizations carried out countrywide vaccination campaigns that reached 18 million children, but the crisis is far from over.
It is recommended that children get a second dose of the vaccine sometime during their second year of life. In DRC, the coverage of infants with the measles vaccine has been documented to be as low as 57%. And there is no second dose yet of the vaccine that has been included into the routine vaccination schedule for infants. So this means every year, out of a birth cohort of about 3.5 million children in the country, 50% are not protected against measles.
Health experts recommend a vaccination rate of 95%. For communities to be protected against the highly contagious disease. The efforts of preventing the measles outbreak have been complicated by some parents' refusal to get their children vaccinated.
I don't want my children to get vaccinated against measles anymore because there seems to be no change. Children continue dying despite getting the shots.
The Congolese government is working with international partners to conduct outreach programs to try and convince parents about the importance of getting their children vaccinated. More than 330,000 measles infections have been recorded across the DRC since January last year. The worst affected areas are in the west of the country. The DRC's weak healthcare system and insecurity in the east have compounded the challenges of ending the disease. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
To Kenya now, where swarms of desert locusts continue to ravage the country's agricultural land. For some farmers, their entire crop disappeared within hours. Others managed to salvage their harvest following government intervention. CGTN's Robert Nagila takes a look at the situation in Tharaka-Nithi County.
It's been a tough few days for 50-year-old father of 6, Benjamin Karugu. On Wednesday, A swarm of desert locusts invaded his 4-acre farm in eastern Kenya in the county of Tharaka Nithi, devouring everything in their path.
I'm still in shock. I have children in school and I depend on this farm for my livelihood. I am confused and I don't know what to do but pray to God.
His entire crop is gone.
I had planted millet, vegetables and beans.
It's a story replicated across much of the affected areas. Since early December, billions of locusts from Somalia and Ethiopia have destroyed tens of thousands of hectares of vegetation across Kenya, threatening the country's food security. All Benjamin can do now is wait for government assistance. But barely 10 kilometers away, the situation is different. Quick action by the government saved surrounding vegetation and crops. I find Japhet Mudengi on his farm harvesting his crop. Locusts invaded his farm last Saturday evening. But a day later, a government plane sprayed pesticides and got rid of them. The evidence scattered across his farm.
I farm on 3.5 acres, but they destroyed the crops on 2 acres.
He's among the lucky ones. He can still salvage a portion of his harvest. While it's still not clear how long it will take to end the locust plague, what is clear is that many will require assistance for the foreseeable future.
Crops have been destroyed completely. Everyone here needs assistance. Fodder for cattle, goats, plus now many parents can't afford school fees. Their livelihoods is destroyed.
Authorities are yet to quantify the damage caused by the locusts. But already the Treasury has warned the invasion could have a negative impact on agricultural output, leading to higher inflation that could affect economic growth. And more misery is on the horizon. UN officials have warned that if the current outbreak is not brought under control soon, the number of locusts could grow 500 times by June. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Tharaka Nithi, Kenya.
All of the business news coming up for you after the break, including sealing the revenue gap. IMF wants Uganda to bring more people into the tax bracket.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Production has officially begun at Tunisia's Nawara field. The production capacity of the field is estimated at 2.7 million cubic meters of gas per day. It's set to increase the North African economy's gas output by 50% and reduce its energy deficit by 20%. CGTN's Adnan Shuashi has more on this development.
The project's production capacity is of 2.7 million cubic meters of gas per day, or 50% of the national production of additional gas, 7,000 barrels of oil, and 3,200 barrels of liquid gas.
The entry into production of the Nawara field will also reduce the energy deficit by 20% and the trade deficit by 7%, which will provide 1 point of growth for Tunisia.
The Nawara field was discovered in January 2006 as part of the Jinan al-Janoub Gardens of the South exploration permit. Subsequent drilling campaigns resulted in 8 more successful wells in 2010.
The Nawara concession was allocated by the Ministry of Industry to the Tunisian National Oil Company and Australian company OMV.
Initially scheduled for October 2019, the entry into operation of the Nawara field was postponed due to technical and social problems.
Tunisia relies on Algeria to meet its commitments in gas. The production in the south will revive the national economy and help us reach energy security.
The South Tunisian gas project comprises a central processing unit at the Nawara well site and 370-kilometer pipeline from Nawara to Gebes, where a gas processing unit will be set up. The Nawara Development Project is a strategic infrastructure project allowing for the development of gas resources in southern Tunisia. This field is part of the growth strategy for the Austrian company OMV in Africa and its portfolio of international activities. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The International Monetary Fund has asked the government of Uganda to focus on bringing more people and entities into the tax bracket. The fund believes the move will help cover the East African nation's funding gap, as well as the huge shortfall being reported by its revenue authority. CGTN's Michael Baleke has that report.
Uganda's economy continues to perform well, according to the International Monetary Fund. Growth is expected to reach 6% this financial year. However, financing the current budget is becoming a challenge given the revenue shortfalls and large expenditure pressures.
We see many people getting registered for taxes but falling off the radar when they are already on board. Secondly, the informality in our economy also makes increasing domestic resource mobilization a little bit tricky.
Half-year results from Uganda Revenue Authority show a shortfall in revenue collections of more than $120 million, and this is likely to result into increased borrowing to fund the ambitious government programs.
Our biggest challenge is the trend. It is on an increasing basis. And considering that there is a threshold for borrowing to GDP at 50%, we tend to see Uganda borrowing towards the 50% threshold, which we think is a bad trend, because then when we reach 50%, then what?
Uganda's debt burden, according to Bank of Uganda, hovers around $12 billion. Uganda's budget has for years relied on donor financing, but with a risk of shortfall in foreign aid. The International Monetary Fund says broadening the tax base and improving efficiency in tax administration is more critical than ever. And the IMF says uncertainties related to the start of oil production and the electoral period coming up in a few months may weigh on Uganda's economic outlook.
What elections usually does is that sometimes we are not able to take enforcement measures because the environment is politically charged, as I may say that. But we will try and ensure that this does not affect our revenue collections.
However, the tax collector says they have stepped up surveillance efforts using technology to check revenue-reducing activities.
We have a plan to deploy drones to be able to support our border interventions. If that is done effectively, we should be able to manage the borders and get to know what is actually crossing around the borders. There are two approaches, visibility and also technology.
Overall, the IMF team wants the government to resist all forms of spending pressures that don't support growth, and that the budget should be realistic and consistent with available domestic revenues. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
The board of the Central Bank of Sudan has been dissolved. A legal committee appointed to dismantle the system set by former President Omar al-Bashir has also sacked board members of 11 other state-owned banks. The Empowerment Removal Committee has retrenched the managers of 8 of the banks in sweeping changes at state-run institutions. However, the central bank governor, Badr Eldin Abdulrahim, retains his position. The committee also dissolved the boards of 9 government companies and institutions. The committee is expected to appoint commissioners to run 2 private newspapers whose assets were frozen last month. New boards will replace the dissolved ones. In November, Sudan passed a law to abolish the system set up by Bashir, who was ousted in April after nearly 3 decades in power. The African Union Commission's Department of Economic Affairs and African Development Bank have launched the 2020 African Economic Outlook Analysis Report. The 2020 report offers numerous ways for African countries to develop their workforce for the future. CG10's Daniel Arapmoy brings us more in this report.
The 2020 Africa's Economic Growth Outlook, launched in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa, indicates stabilization in growth, which is expected to pick up but remains below historical highs. Leading the way are 6 economies among the world's 10 fastest growers: Rwanda, Ethiopia, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Tanzania and Benin. The African Union Commission says growth fundamentals are also improving, with a gradual shift from private consumption toward investment and exports.
This report, which analyzes the policies of a productive transformation, is designed to serve as a practical support of African leaders to achieve the targets of Agenda 2063.
For the first time in a decade, investment accounted for more than half the continent's growth, with private consumption accounting for less than 1/3.
Our desire, therefore, is that the policy recommendations that are made will be implemented and taken into account by the heads of state as they move their economies forward.
Africa's economic outlook continues to brighten. Its GDP growth, estimated at 3.4% for 2019, is projected to accelerate to 3.9% in 2020 and to 4.1% in 2021. But despite Africa's solid growth performance, only about 1/3 of the countries achieved inclusive growth, reducing both poverty and inequality. The African Union says that to make Africa's growth more inclusive, countries need to deepen structural reforms to diversify their productive base, build resilience to extreme weather events, and adopting climate-smart agricultural techniques. To address inequality in education, the outlook appeals for progressive universalism in education spending, setting high priorities for the poor and disadvantaged for basic education where social returns are highest. Daniel Arapmoy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
After the break, Mediterranean cultural exhibition kicks off in Tunisia.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
An exhibition in Tunisia is presenting art as a cultural bridge across the Mediterranean. The month-long show has kicked off in Tunis, as CGTN's Adnan Chouachi reports now from the capital.
The Mediterranean Raft exhibition was created by Enzo Fiammetta, who opted for the prestigious Darbesh Hamba in downtown Tunis. This is one of the most ancient houses and art galleries in the North African state in the Mediterranean basin.
This exhibition is inspired by the Museum of Trame Mediterranee in the Ghibellina region of Sicily. It showcases and brings together the different cultures of the Mediterranean. The work of Ludovico Corrao has influenced multiple aspects of the exhibition.
Fiammetta stressed the borderless nature of art. In fact, Mediterranean artists and people speak different languages, but they share many cultural, artistic, and human experiences and values.
The works are from Morocco, Tunisia, all of North Africa, Spain, Greece, Sicily, and all the Mediterranean countries. The styles may differ, but the message is unique. It aims to facilitate understanding between populations.
The director of the Italian Institute of Culture in Tunis noted that the works on display are meant to show the ancient, deeply rooted links between the various populations of the Mediterranean region.
The collection is very important because ancient artifacts are exhibited. The ceramics, ancient outfits, valuable textiles, handmade pottery and wooden products have historical and cultural value.
The exhibition also presents puppet shows performed with original puppets from the mass immigration of Sicilians in the 19th century and the poetry of Sicilian Arabs. Mediterranean Wafts exhibition makes a statement of action to show that the peoples of this region are interconnected and mixed. It also proves that the Mediterranean art scene is very rich and deeply rooted in the ancestral tradition of travel, free movement and dialogue. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
We've got all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including counting down to the 2020 WRC Safari Rally. Kenya Rally Championship kicks off today.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours?